So James Klotter and Harrison Lowell, they admit to there being a ton of Indians and a ton of Indian attacks, and they know all these different nuances, but they refuse to believe that there were permanent settlements here in Kentucky. So he admits that the Shawnee in the north, Cherokee in the southeast, and the Chickasaw in the southwest. They go on. The Algonquin-speaking ancestors of the Shawnee had apparently lived in Kentucky, usually in villages of a few hundred inhabitants for a considerable period. After being pushed out of Kentucky about 1690 as a result of the Iroquois Fur Wars, the Shawnee moved to the Pennsylvania area. They came back to the Ohio Valley region toward the midpoint of the 18th century, but their claims to Kentucky were jeopardized by land agreements made with the whites by both the Iroquois and the Cherokee. Although the Shawnee probably numbered fewer than 4,000 individuals. Again, just 3 or 4,000, that's it, right? The 3 or 4,000, that's not enough to consider a people actually having a nation. I mean, if 3 or 4,000 is not enough, what is enough? 10,000, 100,000, a million, 3 billion, 15 trillion, 44 gazillion, Rand Paul's number for the amount of people that's being spied on by the NSA. So the 4,000 individuals are here. That's not counted as anything. But the 300 or the 16 people that Daniel Boone comes in with, or the 25, or it seems like when white people get together, they're way more important collectively than when the Indians were getting together. That's because we got literature from the white people. That's why we don't know much about the Indians, because they're not writing any of this stuff down, whereas white people are, and distributing it to everybody, right? So also guns, germs, and steel. That's another reason why the whites have an advantage. Guns, germs, and steel. So they encountered steel first, guns first, and the germs they were able to fight off, or they were given diseases actually. Not only were they given diseases just by being who they were, but they would actually literally give diseases. The British would give the Shawnee blankets that had smallpox on it. The British would, just for fun, be shooting Shawnee, or the Creek Indians. And I heard the Cumberland River. The Cumberland River was Shawnee. The Cumberland River was called the Shawanese, which is another name for Shawnee. So that's amazing to me. It makes me wonder if Kentucky could have been called Kentucky and the Shawanese, the land of the Shawanese. Anyways, so there's Shawnee in Kentucky, about 4,000. They fought valiantly against the aggressive settlers. They constituted a formidable threat to the whites in Kentucky until 1795. 1795. So this is all 1750 to 1795. So for 45 years at least, there is constant white warfare going on here in Kentucky. Many a pioneer housewife cautioned a crying child, "Hush, or the Shawnee will get you. Hush, child, or the Shawnee's gonna get you." Mary Draper Ingalls. So there's two women, the first women in Kentucky that is mentioned in this new history of Kentucky. You have Mary Draper Ingalls, and you also have Jenny Wiley, and they were both kidnapped. So the Indians were just dying for our white women. They're stealing them, right, and bringing them to Kentucky. Mary Draper Ingalls was apparently the first colonial woman to visit Kentucky, although her visit was involuntary. 17-year-old Mary married William Ingalls in 1749 or 1750, and the couple settled in Draper's Meadow in Montgomery County, Virginia. In quick succession, Mary gave birth to 2 boys. She was again pregnant on July 8th, 1755, when about 24 Shawnees suddenly attacked the homestead. So this is July 8th, 1755, which is 1 year after the white people wiped out Skippakithiki in Clark County. So 1755, 24 Shawnees suddenly attacked the homestead. Most of the male settlers were busy with the wheat crop, and they didn't have their guns at hand. William, unable to reach his family, escaped death or captured by hiding behind a log. The Indians took horses, household goods, Mary Ingalls, her sons, and her sister-in-law. So the Indians took everything. The Shawnees, the Aborigine, indigenous people, the natives of this continent, of the North American continent, of the American continents. So the indigenous people of the American continents, the Shawnee also, again it was a Shawnee in 1755. The Shawnee, there's no Iskipikitiki, but the Shawnee are clearly up and at them. They're up and around. They're stealing horses, household goods. They stole Mary Ingalls. They took her sons and her sister-in-law. So Mary Ingalls Draper is alive, and they're being taken by the Shawnee. Although wounded, Mrs. Draper carried the youngest child so that Mary could carry the other boy. Mary pretended indifference to her captivity, and she won praise from the Shawnee for her cooking skills. On the third night, she gave birth to a girl. The march was resumed the next morning. When pursuit did not develop, the Shawnee chose to make a leisurely 29-day trip to Indiantown at the mouth of the Scioto River. Mary's sons and sister-in-law were sent elsewhere, and Mary was adopted as the daughter of the chief. So now you got Mary Ingalls, Mary Draper Ingalls, who's being, kidnapped, but she's being adopted as the daughter-in-chief. So is she having babies? Is she producing kids for the Shawnee? Are there some, mulattoes, which I'm sure there are, right? So in early autumn, Mary was included in a party sent to Big Bone Lick to procure salt. Which is something that the white people would take. The immigrating white people would steal the Indian jobs. The Indians were fur traders. They had and salt procurers, so they come in and they start taking the salt. But they went to Big Bone Lick, which is in Boone County, northern Kentucky. And even though Mary Draper Ingalls had to leave her baby behind, Mary decided to escape. She persuaded an older Dutch woman from Pennsylvania, who's also a captive, to go with her. Lightly armed without a supply of food, the women tried to follow the Ohio River upstream. When they encountered large tributaries, they had to go upstream until they found a crossing and then return to the Ohio. Hunger was her constant partner. They feared the human and animal dangers of the wilderness. The Dutch woman became partially insane and tried to kill Mary Draper Ingalls. Since the Dutch woman was convinced that Mary Draper Ingalls was the cause of all her troubles, reluctantly, Mary had to slip away from her companion. At last, Mary reached the Kanawha River and followed upstream towards her home. After 40 harrowing days of hunger, danger, and terror, Mary Ingalls met a man she had known for years. So she was kidnapped for 40 days. So I guess she couldn't have had a kid in the 40 days. And I don't know what happened with the kids either. She just left her kids there. So she saved herself. Mary Draper Ingalls saved herself. The Dutch woman also survived, made her way to Pennsylvania. One of Mary's sons died in captivity, but the other was reunited with his family in 1768. Tall, black-haired Virginia Sellards Wiley, a.k.a. Jenny Wiley, endured a similar ordeal several years later. Born in Pennsylvania about 1760, she married Thomas Wiley, 1779, in 1789. So this is the first white people. This is 1755. That's when Mary Draper Ingalls came in, 1755. And then 1789 is when Jenny Wiley comes in. So that's the difference of, 34 years. I don't know how she could be the first one because there were several expeditions into Kentucky, Gist and Walker and them, so I don't know how. Whatever, that's what they're saying. They're saying they're one of the first ones, at least. One of the first ones. So 1789, Jenny Wiley was living in Bland County, Virginia on October 1st. Tom Wiley, Jenny's husband, was away with a band of 11 Indians from 4 tribes. So there's 4 different tribes right now that's kidnapping people. Indians from 4 tribes attacked the cabin and killed Jenny's youthful brother and 3 of her children. Claimed by a Shawnee chief, she was taken captive. Her baby was killed a few days later when it slowed her progress, and a son born prematurely was also killed. So they're just killing babies. Now, the Indians spent the next several months in camps in Kentucky in present-day Carter, Lawrence, and Johnson counties. So they spent several months in camps in Kentucky in Carter, Lawrence, and Johnson counties. And Carter County, no, that's Skippakithy's Clark County, but Carter, Lawrence, and Johnson County. So Carter, Lawrence, and Johnson counties is where the Indians spent several months with Jenny Wiley. Jenny Wiley was forced to do camp work and to plant a corn crop in the spring. Tied up when the band went on a hunt, she got her rawhide bonds wet in the rain and she escaped.